Welcome, one more day to space in ENArmonya. As you can see, we have a lovely noon day. It's a bit more than 12 o'clock on the afternoon, and we are experiencing a lovely atmosphere. It seems we are in spring, but we are in October. This is Spain, and the weather is changing. But today is a special day. The whole week has been tremendously special for my sister and I, and obviously some family. The soul of my dad transcended. He passed away last Monday on the 10th of October, and I witnessed the process. It was a tremendously transformative experience. This whole journey of healing and care was for us very different from all we have lived, and especially during these 6 months in which he was very ill, and we took him to our home. My sister came from time to time to help me, and during all these months I have been witnessing many important things. So I would like to tell the whole process, and in the end I will describe how I witnessed his transcendence. In reality, all began a year ago, more or less. I started to witness how the cognitive perception of my dad changed. He felt the weight of my mom's passing away. She passed away in 2019, and I know he felt a tremendous sense of guilt and remorse, because in the last years they argue a lot, and he didn't express as much love as he had inside, because he was a good man, but his personality was heavy. Because of certain traumas, he felt the black sheep in his family line, and if you are different, somehow they see you as a black sheep, so to say. And he felt somehow displaced, marginalized to some extent, and this hardened his personality. He also had a strong sense of ethics and justice, and as he didn't see this in society and his work relations, so to say, he experienced despair, disappointment, and this makes his character harsher. He even had discussions with us from time to time. We love each other, obviously. We didn't split up as in many other families, but obviously we had moments in which one feels some negativity, grudge or resentment for things said. And since the time in which my dad began to lose his faculties, I felt more compassion and mercy. This grew over time, and in the beginning of this year he was already experiencing difficulties even in walking. He had pain in the hip and the back, and I took him for walks. He became very obedient, even though he had been very rebel, but because of his condition he became more like a child. I already spoke about this months ago, if you recall. And in those moments something in me began to change as well, because I became like a father for him. It's somehow strange how things become reversed, that being a son that receives care from your parents, you end up taking care of them. In this case, I took care of my dad because my mom was already in another plane. I grew and matured a lot. Both my sister and I experienced a tremendous process of increasing maturity in this whole situation. And as I said, when you see your dad in those conditions, your heart becomes increasingly open. And you start to express the loving care that in other situations of life you didn't express. Because of certain blockages of personality, even fears. As my dad was very reactive, sometimes I fear to give him a hug or say him something because he was somehow tough, and he in some occasions rejected a sense of care, and obviously you feel hurt and you are afraid of feeling hurt, so you keep certain feelings for yourself. I know you understand because this is the same everywhere. But once life gives you the opportunity to take care of your dad, for instance, something can change if you open your heart. If you reject the situation and feel it as a tragedy, existence will make it worse. In this case, all flew very harmoniously because we accepted it. We accepted the situation from the beginning, and we knew it was a tremendous opportunity to grow. Actually, 6 months ago there was a huge turn when my dad fell at home while I was working in my room. It was at night, and this time he was in much pain. He had fallen several times before, but in those occasions he somehow kept the pain for himself. He was tremendously heavy, but this time he cried, and we took him to the hospital, and that's when doctors found the whole severe condition that he suffered. He not only had 4 broken ribs and 3 broken vertebrae that probably came from previous falls. He also had emphysema and lung cancer. And those news obviously were very shocking for us at that time, even though since the beginning we opened our heart and we accepted whatever was to come. And I remember that when doctors came to speak with us, they told us that my dad was very weak and his cognitive condition made it even more difficult for him to undergo the chemotherapy treatment, so they didn't recommend it. And we obviously agree with that. Even if my dad had been prepared for that treatment, we would have rejected it because we don't trust in those procedures. Even my dad didn't believe in conventional medicine. We were always following natural treatments for many things, and in this case was clear. We decided to take my dad home and help him to live the last part of his journey. That's how I put it. And doctor said, well, that's very understandable. So he was 2 weeks hospitalized, and there his liver got filled with the toxic medicines given in the hospital. Doctors admitted that his liver was saturated and it had to be cleansed. Something that we did at home because we started natural treatment. The first thing that my sister did was to call a naturopath, homeopath, that she knew because she had been working with him, undergoing certain treatment. He is very famous here in Spain. He lives in Navarra, in the north part, near the Basque country, and he has a very good reputation for knowing natural substances. So he recommended certain medicine, mistletoe from Chile, and a few more supplements to increase the immune system and cleanse the liver and so on. And obviously, together with that, I changed my dad's diet. I made it anti-inflammatory. And all this, plus all the love we gave him, led to an improvement of his vitality. He started to walk with me at home. I even applied music therapy for him. There are a few videos. I will publish them, so stay tuned. So this whole process was very healing for all of us. We learned a lot. We began to understand much more the importance of giving love and care to break the heavy personality we have. And sometimes harsh circumstances are needed to grow, because when you don't choose the way of conscience, you have to experience the way of pain. This is how the universe works. Not because there is punishment, but because when you break certain harmonia, nature finds its way to restore harmonia by painful ways. This is just part of the natural flow, and in this case, the experience was painful. Obviously, my dad was burning a tremendous amount of negative karma. I wonder many times what he had done to experience all that torture, because he was full of severe conditions, so something must have led to that situation. But as I said, I don't see it as a punishment. And now it all has been a blessing. It's hard to accept those conditions sometimes, but the more you resist pain and suffering, the more it persists. What you resist persists, what you fear appears. And this is why we accepted the whole situation. And as my dad improved to a certain extent, we asked him if he wanted to go on holidays. So he said yes, and we went to Portugal, and there you have the videos I made. Most of them are in Spanish, but you have a few in English, and even with subtitles. And I think that experience was very important because it broke certain inertia. We demonstrated that you can take a patient that is having severe conditions to the sea and enjoy with him. Obviously, he couldn't walk much. Most of the time he was or sitting, lying down, or in the wheelchair. However, he endured the 2 long trips and the days we were staying in Portugal. And when we came back, he kept having that vitality. His lung pain disappeared. I think the tumor itself was in the process of remission, healing. Even though the emphysema remained, he had some difficulties in breathing, even though we didn't use much the oxygen machine that we were given, a machine that generates oxygen from the air in the atmosphere. We use it from time to time, and my dad didn't even spit blood as time before, but his cognitive condition kept decreasing. He obviously was experiencing a type of Alzheimer. Now there are many cognitive problems that are labeled as Alzheimer or dementia. It's all the same, affecting different parts of the brain. In the case of my dad, was the frontal lobe. It was a severe atrophy, as doctor said, and he had problems expressing things, making certain deductions, using certain concepts. So his language was very simple. He was very much like a child. You can see it in some videos.
Trenos.
Ya suenan trenos, sí. O truenos. Trenos o truenos.
Truenos por ahí.
El apocalipsis se está formando aquí arriba. And due to this cognitive degeneration. One day, this was in the beginning of September, I was sleeping beside him and he wanted to get up on his own and he fell. So he broke his hip. Fortunately, it wasn't the femur, but the cotylus, which is the part that covers the femur. And he could not be operated because of his condition. General anesthesia would have killed him. And doctor sent him back home with me. Obviously, he had to rest fully. He could not stand up. And he had to rest either on the sofa or the bed. And that's how we proceeded. The problem is that this led to another problem, which is very common, by the way. There are certain pressure ulcers, as they are called, that appear in the areas that are more in contact with the bed or the way in which you are lying down. And in this case, it all began with a certain little ulcer, which became bigger and bigger. And precisely in those days, we received a call from the nearby medical center, from the Social Security, and they curiously offer nursing help, something that was very helpful for us. And they sent a young man that told us about this whole situation of pressure ulcers. And at that time, the nursing man told us that it wasn't as bad as many others, even though we had to cleanse the wound and put gauzes, certain coverings to keep anything from entering and infecting the wound. So we cleanse the wound every day, but the hole became bigger. I think it was because it was inevitable to move my dad from one side to the other, and in that situation it's very difficult that a wound heals itself. And the problem with my dad is that right in the coccyx he had a protrusion because of his vertebrae that broke months before, and this protrusion was somehow pushing the wound from within, and this made the whole situation much worse because it opened a hole. And this was a torture for him, even for us, because moving him made it very difficult. He even shouted in pain in the last days, despite I cleansed the wound several times a day, even with seawater, and this improved the aspect to some extent. But moving him was a torture. Even for me, it was very difficult because I had to use all my physical strength, and I injured my back a little bit. It hurts still, but I did it with care, obviously. And we also put a sort of inflatable toy in the sofa so he was not in contact with the cushion, and it somehow worked. You have a picture here. And all this made him lose much vitality. He lost his will to struggle. He had lost the will to live months before, or even when my mom passed away, because he didn't see any deeper meaning. He didn't work on himself spiritually, and this was a huge obstacle for him because he could not make sense of the whole situation. And this is why these problems became like climbing a vertical wall. So last Sunday I already saw that there was something different. He could not even hold himself in the wheelchair. He fell sideways. Sometimes I even thought that he could be having a brain stroke. But as he replied a few questions, as how many fingers do you see, and as he replied properly, consciously, I guessed that he was just losing vitality. He could not even stand with the weight of his soul. So that night, from Sunday to Monday, he was very weak, and I asked him if he wanted the oxygen all night long, and he said yes. So I connected the machine. In the last days he demanded the oxygen from the machine more, something that he had refused in previous weeks because it was annoying for him. But in this case, he wanted the air through his nostrils, and it was very curious because he breathed through the nostrils with the mouth closed like this. It was all the night through like that, and I could barely sleep, just 2 hours. My dad was coming and going, and I could also see that he was not fully aware of the situation. He was half unconscious. So I thought that was different. On the morning he remained more time in bed, and when he recovered a little bit, I asked him if he wanted me to give him a shower. And I was surprised because he said yes. So I took him carefully to the shower. He was falling sideways again, and I showered him as I could. He came upon me. He could not hold himself. And in those moments I wondered, what should I do? Should I call to the emergency services so that they take him to the hospital and alleviate his suffering, or I help him to transcend? And instinctively, that's what I did. I didn't want him to pass away in a cold hospital full of medicines and artificial breathing. So I took him to bed, and I thought that was going to be his deathbed. So I began to meditate in silence beside him, sending love and light, commanding the help for his soul, connecting with the primordial Father and my divine family, so that he received proper guidance. And I remained quite a while with him. Then I went to other place of the house to do something else. And when I came back, he was watching me with his eyes fully open. He looked like a child, full of innocence and humility. And this was very shocking to me. So I asked him, do you want to have breakfast? And he said yes. And as he seemed to have more vitality, I didn't remember at that time that right before a person passes away, in many cases there is an improvement, as if the soul wants to communicate something for the last time or receive something from his beloved ones. So I took him carefully, put him in the wheelchair. He didn't complain in pain as in previous days. This was strange as well. I think the body was generating endorphins, painkillers, to avoid the suffering. I took him to the lounge. I put him on the inflatable swimming pool toy so that he was comfortable, and I prepared the breakfast for him, a puree of cooked fruit. I think it was banana, pear, and a little bit of quinoa. And he ate it very well, without delay, because in previous days sometimes he took time to taste the puree or whatever, but this time he swallowed spoon after spoon rather quickly. So after breakfast I just gave him a few caresses, showing my love to him, and went to take the broom to sweep the lounge. And in silence, I began to sweep in a very meditative state. I remember everything was very tranquil. I didn't put music or anything. And I still remember the whole situation. I sense myself sweeping in silence, paying attention to the moment. And then I finished. I went to the kitchen to take the clothes from the washing machine. And at that precise moment, I heard a strange voice sound coming from him, obviously. I also felt that his breathing was different. So I went quickly to the lounge, and he was already unconscious. His body was giving the last breaths. I called my sister and I said, "Come, because Dad is leaving." She thought he was going to leave a bit more, but I knew that was the moment. And he wasn't responding to any stimuli. The body was anesthetized, obviously. Otherwise, he would have suffered a lot, the process of asphyxia. And I took his constants, vital constants, with the oximeter, and I was shocked to see that his oxygen levels were very high, 99, which is the normal level for most of us. I am between 97 and 98 normally. From 95 to 100 is the normal range, and my dad was usually between 75 and 86 at most. Sometimes he went below 75, something which is a condition of urgency in medical terms, because those levels of hypoxia are very dangerous. The brain can get damaged very easily. Even when a person goes to 80, it begins to be a matter to worry. And in this case, I was shocked because it didn't make sense. And his heartbeat was 34, very low. So those two peaks were very shocking to me. I don't know the medical scientific explanation. Maybe the body releases oxygen into the blood in the process of losing all the vitality. And as I saw that he was leaving, I just left the oximeter. I put my forehead on my dad's forehead and I said, "I love you, Dad. Thank you for all the support. Don't be afraid." And at that moment, the breath became very thin, and very quickly the body stopped breathing. It was very smooth. It was all in tranquility. It wasn't something I felt as tremendously shocking. I knew that was going to happen. I felt not only a tremendous love, but also a tremendous gratefulness, because that's exactly what we wish for him. A peaceful departure. And somehow it was like a gift. I was speaking about this the other day in a video when I said, if you don't expect the unexpected, you won't find it, because difficult it is to find. This was said by Heraclitus of Ephesus, a great sage from the ancient Greece, and he was giving a key, because we should have hope for certain important things, but at the same time we should let go. Don't get attached to the results. Allow life to bring what is needed. And in this case, that was the case. We hope for his peaceful departure, and the universe granted us that blessing. I know that he must be undergoing a certain process. He probably was witnessing what was happening from the outside, probably. I know he must have been undergoing a process of examination in conscience to see what he did, what he made others feel. There are certain testimonies of how it happens, and I have also a certain intuition of how it is. I know you see everything you have done in first person, but also from the outside at the same time, as objectively, impartially, being the witness of your life. And you also feel what others felt in your presence or with whatever you did. And in this complete picture, you can evolve deeper. So I hope that my dad is well accompanied and guided. I will keep reflecting on all this, which has been the most transformative experience for my sister and I. Now it's a different stage, and we can proceed with our soul evolution journey. I probably will continue with these reflections, but this will be for the next time. So thank you very much for listening, and let's keep feeling our connection to the primordial Father to express his love without limits, life without fragmentation, integral conscience, and deep blissful serenity.